I gave them everything. Every dollar I earned scrubbing floors, every dream I buried so theirs could fly. I worked until my hands bled and my spine curved like a question mark. And when I finally needed them, when the cancer came and the bills piled higher than my hope, they vanished. My 3 children, the ones I birthed, the ones I raised, they locked their doors, silenced their phones, and left me to rot in a room that smelled like death and broken promises. Don't miss a single beat of the story. Hit that subscribe button right now, smash the like, share this with a friend, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Your double dose of my 10 p.m. stories awaits you every single day at 10 a.m. and 10 a.m. They say blood is thicker than water. They say a mother's love is eternal, unbreakable, sacred. But what happens when that love flows only one way? When you pour everything into vessels that refuse to pour back? This is the story of Margaret Chen, a woman who sacrificed her entire existence for her children's futures, only to discover that gratitude has an expiration date, and family can become strangers overnight when convenience turns into burden. The doctor's words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, 6 months, maybe less. I sat in that sterile office with its motivational posters about courage and fighting spirit, and all I could think about was how I'd tell my children. Michael, 38, the successful lawyer. Jennifer, 35, the marketing executive. David, 32, the software engineer. My 3 miracles, my reason for everything. I raised them alone after their father died when they were still in elementary school. Richard had been my whole world, and when he left, I became 2 parents in one body. I worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, waitressing during lunch shifts, doing alterations on weekends. My fingers were perpetually pricked with needle marks. My feet swelled so badly I could barely fit into my shoes, but I never complained, not once. Michael got into Yale, Jennifer went to Northwestern, David chose MIT. I paid every tuition bill, every dorm fee, every spring break. I cashed out my retirement, I sold the house Richard and I had bought together, and moved into a cramped studio apartment above a laundromat. The machines hummed through the walls at all hours, but I didn't care. My children were becoming something. They graduated with honors, they got their perfect jobs in their perfect cities. They sent cards on Mother's Day with generic messages inside. They called on my birthday, voices rushed, always with somewhere else to be. And I told myself this was success. This was what I'd worked for. Their independence meant I'd done everything right. But sitting in Dr. Morrison's office that Tuesday afternoon, staring at the x-rays that showed my insides lighting up like a constellation of death, I realized something that made my chest feel hollow. I had no one to call. I'd sacrificed my friendships for extra shifts. I'd given up my hobbies to afford their textbooks. I'd let my siblings drift away because I was too tired, too broke, too busy building my children's futures to maintain my own relationships. Now, at 63, with cancer eating through my organs, I was utterly alone except for the 3 people I'd given everything to. I drove home in my ancient Honda, the check engine light glowing like a warning I couldn't afford to heed, and practiced how I'd say it. I called Michael first. His secretary answered. He had a secretary now, a detail that always made me proud and sad simultaneously. Chen Law Offices, how may I direct your call? The voice was young, efficient, bored. It's his mother, Margaret Chen. Is he available? A pause, typing sounds. He's in a deposition that's expected to run until 6. Can I take a message? I swallowed hard. Just tell him to call me. It's important. Is this regarding the Thompson case? Because he specifically said, it's his mother, I repeated, my voice cracking slightly. Please, just have him call. I tried Jennifer next. Straight to voicemail. Her outgoing message was crisp, professional, ending with, "I'll return your call within 24 to 48 hours." 48 hours. I left a message trying to sound casual, trying not to let the desperation seep through. "Hi, honey, it's Mom. Nothing urgent, just need to talk when you get a chance. Love you." David answered on the fourth ring, sounding distracted. I could hear the mechanical clicking of a keyboard in the background. "Hey, Mom, kind of in the middle of something. What's up?" "David, I need to tell you something." My voice sounded strange in my own ears, thin, fragile, like glass about to shatter. The typing continued. "Can it wait? We're launching a new update tonight, and I'm debugging a critical issue. How about I call you this weekend?" "It's Tuesday," I said quietly. "Right, so 4 days. That work for you?" He wasn't even really asking. I should have said it then. I should have just told him. But something in his tone, that distracted, irritated edge, made me lose my nerve. "Sure, this weekend is fine." He hung up before I could say goodbye. I sat on my threadbare couch, the one I'd bought from a thrift store 12 years ago, and stared at my phone. The screen went dark. My reflection stared back at me from the black glass, a tired woman with silver hair and dark circles deep enough to hold secrets. Michael called back 3 days later, at 7 in the morning. I was already awake. I'd been awake since 4, the pain in my abdomen making sleep impossible, even with the medication Dr. Morrison had prescribed. "Michael, sorry, crazy week. What did you need?" I took a breath. "Michael, I need to tell you something. I went to the doctor on Tuesday." "Everything okay?" His voice had that automatic concern, the kind you use when you're already thinking about something else. "Not really. They found cancer, pancreatic. It's advanced." Silence. Then, "Jesus, Mom, that's how advanced?" "Stage 4. They're saying 6 months, maybe less." More silence. I could hear him breathing, hear the shuffle of papers. Okay. What's the treatment plan? Surgery? Chemo?" "They said chemo might buy me some time, but the prognosis isn't good either way. Michael, I'm going to need help. The treatment is expensive, and I can't work anymore. I'm already so weak, and Mom," his voice had changed, gone cold and calculated. This was his lawyer voice. "Have you looked into your insurance coverage? What about Medicare?" "I have Medicare, but there are still costs, copays, medications, someone to help me get to appointments, and—" "Right. Look, let me talk to Jennifer and David. We'll figure something out. I have to run. I have court in 40 minutes. I'll call you back soon, okay?" He didn't call back. I texted Jennifer the diagnosis, unable to go through another phone call. She responded 6 hours later. "OMG, Mom, I'm so sorry. Let's talk soon. Swamped with a campaign launch." David didn't respond at all. The chemotherapy room was painted a pale yellow that someone probably thought was cheerful, but actually looked like disease. I sat in a recliner with an IV in my arm, poison dripping into my veins, surrounded by other dying people in various stages of acceptance or denial. The woman next to me, Agnes, had her daughter with her. The daughter held her mother's hand, stroked her hair, and brought her ginger ale when the nausea hit. They talked quietly about Agnes's grandchildren, about plans for Thanksgiving, about hope. I had my phone. I scrolled through old photos while the chemicals burned through my bloodstream. Pictures of Michael's law school graduation. I'd sold my car to afford the flight to New Haven. Jennifer's wedding 5 years ago. I'd worked overtime for 3 months to give her the check she'd asked for as a gift. David's 30th birthday party at some expensive restaurant in San Francisco. I'd eaten plain noodles for 2 weeks to afford the plane ticket. In every photo, they were smiling. In every photo, I was on the edge of the frame, slightly out of focus, already fading. The nurse came to check my vitals. "No one with you today, honey?" "My children are busy," I said automatically. "They have important jobs." She nodded with a sad smile that told me she'd heard this before. She'd seen this before. the pattern of adult children who disappeared when their parents became inconvenient. When the session ended, I drove myself home. I had to pull over twice to vomit into plastic bags I'd brought for exactly that purpose. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. The 15-minute drive took 45 minutes. I climbed the stairs to my apartment. There was no elevator, pausing on each landing to catch my breath. My neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, opened her door. "Margaret, you look terrible. Are you all right?" "Just tired," I lied. She studied me with sharp eyes. "Your children coming to help?" I smiled. "They're very busy. Successful. I'm very proud." The lie tasted like metal in my mouth. 2 weeks after my diagnosis, Michael sent an email. Not a phone call, not a visit, an email. Subject: family discussion. "Mom, Jennifer and David and I have been talking. We want to help, but we also need to be realistic about everyone's situations. Michael is dealing with a potential partnership vote. Jennifer's company is going through a merger. David just bought a house and his expenses are tight. We think the best solution is for you to look into state assistance programs and maybe consider moving to a more affordable living situation. We can help research options. We're all very busy right now, but let's plan a family call in a few weeks to discuss next steps. Love, Michael." I read it 17 times. Each time, I tried to find the love he'd signed with. Each time, I came up empty. A family call in a few weeks, next steps, state assistance programs, a more affordable living situation. Translation: you're on your own. I drafted a response, deleted it, drafted another, deleted that too. What could I say? How could I explain that I wasn't asking for handouts, but for presence, for someone to sit with me during treatment, for a phone call more than once a week, for them to see me as something other than a problem requiring a solution? I finally wrote, "I understand. Love you all." Jennifer replied with a heart emoji. David didn't respond at all. I sat in my apartment that night, the laundromat machines thrumming below like a mechanical heartbeat, and did something I hadn't done in years. I cried, not quiet tears, but the kind of sobbing that comes from somewhere deep and ancient, the kind that bends your body and empties your lungs and leaves you gasping. I cried for the version of myself who'd believed that sacrifice equaled love, who'd thought that giving everything meant you'd receive something in return. I cried for my children, who'd learned from me that parents exist to serve, to provide, to disappear when their usefulness ends. The medical bills arrived like clockwork, each envelope thicker than the last. Copays, medications, lab work, scans. The numbers climbed into thousands, then tens of thousands. My Medicare covered some, but the gaps were vast and terrifying. I'd never been in debt. Even at my poorest, raising 3 children alone, I'd paid every bill on time. I'd gone without meals. I'd worn shoes with holes. I'd kept the heat at 58 degrees in winter, but I'd paid my bills. Now, at 63, dying from cancer, I watched my credit score collapse like my body. I called Michael's office again. His secretary recognized my voice now. "Mrs. Chen, he's asked me to direct all calls to his personal cell phone." I called his cell. Voicemail. I left a message about the bills, trying to keep the panic out of my voice, trying to sound reasonable and not desperate. He texted back 4 hours later. "Sorry, Mom, slammed at work. Did you apply for the assistance programs I sent?" I had applied. I'd spent 3 days navigating websites designed to confuse, filling out forms that required information I didn't have, making phone calls that ended with, "You don't qualify," or "The waiting list is 14 months," or "You'll need a family member to co-sign." I texted back, "Applied, still waiting. Bills are due now." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Hang in there. It'll work out." It'll work out, as if cancer and debt and abandonment were just minor inconveniences that resolved themselves with positive thinking. I called Jennifer. She answered this time, voice bright and professional. "Mom, how are you feeling?" "Terrible," I said honestly. "The treatment makes me so sick, and the bills are overwhelming, and I really need—" I know, it's so hard. Have you tried meditation? Sarah from my office swears by this app that helps with stress and Jennifer, I need help. Actual help. I need someone to come with me to appointments. I need help with the bills. I'm drowning. A pause. Mom, we talked about this. We're all stretched thin right now. Have you looked into home health care? There are services for that cost money I don't have. Another pause, longer this time. It happened on a Thursday. I was trying to get to the bathroom. The nausea from the chemo hit fast and merciless. My legs buckled. I went down hard, hitting my hip on the corner of the coffee table, my head bouncing off the floor. I lay there for a moment, stunned, tasting blood. I'd bitten my tongue. The room spun. Pain radiated from my hip in hot waves. I reached for my phone, managed to grab it, called 911. The paramedics were kind, young. They loaded me onto a stretcher with practiced efficiency, asking questions I struggled to answer. In the ambulance, one of them held my hand. "Who should we call? Your emergency contact?" "My son, Michael." I recited his number. They called him. I heard his voice through the phone's speaker, distant and tinny. "Is she okay?" "She's had a fall, sir. We're taking her to the county general. She's conscious but confused. You should meet us there." "I'm in Sacramento for a case. Can you call her daughter?" They called Jennifer. Voicemail. They called David. Voicemail. At the hospital, they found a fractured hip and a mild concussion. The doctor, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, said I'd need surgery and several weeks of recovery. "You'll need someone to help you at home. You can't be alone." "My children will help," I said automatically. She looked at my chart, at the emergency contact list with 3 unreturned calls. Her expression told me she'd heard this lie too. They kept me overnight. I slept in fits, waking to the sounds of hospital machines and other people's emergencies. My phone stayed silent. Michael called the next morning at 10. "Jesus, why didn't you tell me it was this serious?" "They tried to call you." "I was in court. My phone was off. How are you?" "I need surgery and help." Silence. "Right. Okay, let me see what I can arrange. Maybe there's a service or—" "Michael, I need you, or Jennifer, or David. I need my children." "Mom, that's not fair. We all have lives. We can't just drop everything." I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind him of every sacrifice, every missed opportunity, every dream I buried so his could flourish. Instead, I said quietly, "I never asked you to drop everything. I gave you everything willingly. And we're grateful, we are, but that doesn't mean we can put our lives on hold indefinitely." Indefinitely. I had 6 months, maybe less. That was his indefinitely. They operated on my hip 3 days later. I signed the consent forms alone. I was wheeled into the OR alone. I woke up in recovery alone. A social worker visited my room the next day. Her name was Patricia, and she had the gentle, exhausted manner of someone who'd seen too much human suffering. She pulled up a chair beside my bed. "Margaret, we need to discuss your discharge plan. You can't go home alone. You need assistance for at least 6 weeks. Do you have a family who can help?" "My children," I said. "They're very successful. Busy, but they'll help." She glanced at my chart. "I see we've tried contacting them multiple times. Perhaps we should look at other options. There are rehabilitation facilities, assisted living arrangements." "I don't need assisted living. I just need to heal." "These places have physical therapy, nursing care around the clock, help with medications, and—" "How much do they cost?" She hesitated. "With your Medicare and—" "How much?" "Several thousand a month, but there are programs." "I can't afford that." She nodded slowly. "Then we need to contact your children. Can you try calling them again?" I called Michael. Voicemail. I called Jennifer. Voicemail. I called David. He answered. "Mom? Hey, sorry I've been MIA. Work has been insane." "David, I need you to come. I had surgery and—" "Surgery? What? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "We tried. They called you. I texted." "David, I need help. I can't be alone." Mom, I'm in Seattle. My project deadline is next week. Can't Michael or Jennifer? They're not answering. A long pause. Okay, look, let me talk to them. We'll figure something out. How long do you need help? 6 weeks, maybe more. 6 weeks? His voice rose slightly. Mom, that's a long time. I don't know if I can. I raised you for 18 years, I said quietly. I'm asking for 6 weeks. The words hung between us, sharp and bitter. That's not fair, he finally said. They sent me to a rehabilitation facility called Meadowbrook Care Center. It was not a meadow and there were no brooks. It was a beige building that smelled like antiseptic and resignation. My room was small, a bed, a chair, a TV bolted to the wall, a window that looked out onto a parking lot. My roommate was a woman named Dolores, who'd had a stroke and couldn't speak. She stared at the TV all day, watching game shows with the sound off. The nurses were overworked and underpaid. They moved efficiently, mechanically, checking vitals and administering medications with the minimum amount of human contact. I understood. They had too many patients and not enough time. Physical therapy was painful. A therapist named Marcus pushed me to walk with a walker, to climb stairs, to regain strength in my fractured hip. I wanted to quit every day. The pain was immense, but the alternative, staying in this place forever, was worse. I called my children every day. Sometimes they answered, most times they didn't. When Michael answered, he'd ask how I was in a distracted voice, then launch into stories about his caseload, his partnership vote, the new car he was considering. He never asked if I was lonely. He never asked if I was scared. Jennifer visited once, 3 weeks into my stay. She brought flowers and guilt. She stayed for 20 minutes, perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, checking her phone repeatedly. Mom, this place seems nice, she said, looking around the room with forced brightness. It's not nice, Jennifer. It's where people go when they have no one. She flinched. That's not fair. We're doing our best. Your best, I said quietly, looks a lot like abandonment. She stood up. I should go. Traffic is terrible this time of day. She kissed my forehead and I smelled her expensive perfume, the one I could never afford. Feel better, Mom. She didn't come back. David never visited at all. The breaking point came on a Sunday morning. I'd been at Meadowbrook for 5 weeks. My hip was healing, but slowly. The cancer was progressing, faster than the doctors had predicted. The pain had become a constant companion, a low hum that occasionally spiked into screaming agony. I was sitting in the common room, they encouraged socialization, watching other residents with their families, daughters braiding their mother's hair, sons playing cards with their fathers, grandchildren running around, bringing chaos and life into the sterile space. My phone rang. Michael. Mom, quick question. Remember that insurance policy Dad had? The life insurance? My heart went cold. Yes. What happened to it? I cashed it out to pay for your law school. Silence. Then, all of it? Yes, Michael, all of it. You needed it. Right. Okay, it's just Jennifer and I were talking, and we thought maybe there was something left for, final arrangements, estate stuff. Final arrangements. Estate stuff? He was calling to ask about money for my funeral. There's nothing left, I said, my voice hollow. I spent everything on you three. Every insurance policy, every savings account, my retirement, everything. Jesus, Mom, you should have saved something. I laughed, actually laughed. It sounded manic even to my own ears. Saved? With what money, Michael? I was working 3 jobs to keep you fed and educated. When was I supposed to save? Other parents manage. Other parents had partners. Other parents had family support. I had nothing but you 3 and the belief that you'd remember what I gave up. We do remember, he said, defensive now. We're grateful, but gratitude doesn't pay bills, Mom. No, I agreed. Apparently, nothing does. Not love, not sacrifice, not 3 childhoods worth of devotion. Mom, I hung up. Then I blocked his number. I blocked Jennifer's. I blocked David's. I sat in that common room surrounded by other people's families and made peace with dying alone. If this is hitting hard, you're not alone. Stay with me. The story gets deeper. Something strange happened after I blocked my children's numbers. A lightness, a clarity. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't waiting for them to call. I wasn't checking my phone every 10 minutes, hoping for a text that never came. I wasn't making excuses for their absence. I was simply alone, and somehow that felt cleaner than being abandoned. Patricia, the social worker, noticed the change. She said, "You seem different." I am different. I've accepted reality, which is that I have no family, that I'm going to die alone, that the 3 people I built my entire life around don't actually want me in theirs. I said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity, just stating facts. She was quiet for a moment. "Have you thought about unblocking them? Giving them a chance to what? Show up? They've had 2 months. 2 months of me being sick, injured, terrified. They've had 2 months to choose me. They chose themselves. Maybe they don't understand how serious. They understand perfectly. They just don't care enough." Patricia sighed. "Where will you go when you're discharged? You can't go back to your apartment. The stairs alone. I'll figure it out." Margaret, I always have. That was true. I'd always figured it out. When Richard died and left me with 3 kids and a mortgage I couldn't afford. When Michael got sick in 2nd grade and missed 2 months of school. When Jennifer's college roommate stole her laptop and I had to buy a replacement. When David's car broke down in Nevada and I wired him money I didn't have. I'd always figured it out. This would be no different. Agnes, the woman from the chemo room, appeared at Meadowbrook one Tuesday afternoon. I was surprised to see her. She looked better than the last time we'd met, color in her cheeks, steadier on her feet. "Margaret?" She stood in my doorway, holding a casserole dish. "I was visiting someone else and saw your name on the board. Thought I'd drop by." Dolores stared at us from her bed, eyes fixed on Agnes with unusual interest. "Come in," I said, genuinely pleased. "How are you?" She sat in the visitor's chair, the one Jennifer had perched in for 20 minutes. "In remission, can you believe it? The doctors are calling it a miracle." She set the casserole on my bedside table. "My daughter made this, said I should bring it. There's enough for several meals." I felt tears prick my eyes. "That's very kind. How are you doing? Your family been by?" I hesitated, then decided on honesty. "No, we had a falling out." She nodded knowingly. "Let me guess. They disappeared when you got sick?" "How did you—" "Happens more than you'd think. My support group is full of stories like that. Adult children who can't handle their parents being sick, who vanish when they're needed most." She leaned forward. "Want to know what I learned?" "What?" "That sometimes the family you need isn't the family you're born with. It's the family you find." It was a nice sentiment, a beautiful sentiment, but I was tired and dying and freshly abandoned. "That works in movies," I said. "In real life, I'm alone." "Are you?" She gestured around the room. "You've got Marcus in PT who asks about you when you're not there. You've got that nurse, Rosa, who brings you extra pudding. You've got me, showing up with a casserole. That's not nothing, Margaret." She was right, of course, but it wasn't the same as having your children care. It wasn't the same as mattering to the people you'd sacrificed everything for. Still, I thanked her. I ate the casserole, chicken and rice, perfectly seasoned, and I thought about what she'd said. That night, unable to sleep, I decided to write letters, not to my children, I was done with them, but to myself, to the woman I'd been before I became just mom. Dear Margaret, you were 22 when Richard died, 22 years old with 3 babies and a mountain of grief. You could have crumbled. You could have given up. Instead, you worked. You survived. You built a life out of scraps and sheer will. I'm sorry you forgot who you were somewhere along the way. I'm sorry you thought your only value was in what you could give to others. I'm sorry you disappeared so completely that when your children looked at you, they didn't see a person. They saw a service, a bank, a convenience. That wasn't your fault. You were doing your best. But Margaret, you deserved more than this ending. I wrote until my hand cramped. I wrote about dreams I'd abandoned. I'd wanted to be a teacher once, before Richard died and reality demanded something more immediately lucrative. I wrote about friendships I'd let wither. I wrote about the version of myself who'd loved dancing, who'd read poetry, who'd had opinions about things beyond my children's needs. Somewhere in those pages, I found her again. That woman, Margaret. Not mom, not a caretaker, not sacrifice personified, just Margaret. And I realized something profound. My children hadn't killed her. I had. In my desperation to be a good mother, I'd erased myself so completely that even I'd forgotten there was anything else to be. They discharged me on a Thursday. Patricia had found me a spot in a subsidized senior apartment complex, Riverside Towers, which was neither by a river nor a tower, but a squat 4-story building in a rough neighborhood. The apartment was a studio, tiny, but it was on the first floor, no stairs, and it was mine. The rent was calculated based on my disability payments. I could just barely afford it. Marcus helped me move in. He wasn't supposed to, this wasn't part of his job, but he showed up anyway with his truck. We loaded my meager belongings, clothes, some kitchen items, and my photos. "Are you going to be okay here?" he asked, looking around the bare apartment with concern. "I've been okay in worse places." He nodded, then pulled something from his pocket, a business card. "This is my cousin's number. She runs a home care agency. Sliding scale fees. If you need help, call her. Tell her I sent you." "Marcus, I can't afford sliding scale," he repeated firmly. "That means they work with what you've got. Promise me you'll call if you need help." I promised. After he left, I stood in my empty apartment and tried to feel something. Relief? Despair? Fear? Instead, I felt nothing, just a vast, echoing silence where my old life used to be. My phone, I'd gotten a new number, one my children didn't have, rang. Unknown caller. "Mrs. Chen, this is Dr. Morrison's office. You missed your appointment today. We need to reschedule your chemo." I looked around my apartment. The bare walls, the single window looking out onto a dumpster, the life I'd been reduced to. "I'm not rescheduling," I heard myself say. "Mrs. Chen, your treatment plan." "I'm stopping treatment." Silence. Then, "Let me transfer you to Dr. Morrison." "No need. I'm done. Thank you for everything." I hung up before they could argue. Stopping chemo wasn't giving up. That's what I told myself. It was choosing quality over quantity, choosing to spend my remaining time, however much or little, without poison in my veins, without nausea and weakness and hair loss, without hope making me a liar. Dr. Morrison called personally the next day. "Margaret, I understand you're withdrawing from treatment." "Yes." "Can we talk about this? Come in, let me—" "Doctor, I'm 63 years old. I have advanced cancer, I have no family support and limited resources. The chemo was buying me what? A few extra months of suffering? Possibly more than that. The treatment was showing some hope, some possibility. Doctor, I can't afford hope. Hope costs too much." He was quiet. "What about palliative care, hospice? You don't have to suffer." "I'll think about it." "Please do. And Margaret, I'm sorry about all of it." "Me too." I did call hospice eventually. A nurse named Claire came to assess me. She was maybe 50, with silver streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen too much death to be shocked by anything. She asked me questions about pain levels, about my living situation, about support systems. "Family?" she asked gently. "None." She didn't push. We can provide a volunteer visitor program, people who sit with patients, keep them company. Strangers, I said. Sometimes strangers are easier than family. She was right about that. Claire set me up with pain medication, a hospital bed that fit in my studio, and weekly visits. She also connected me with the volunteer program. A woman named Helen started coming twice a week. She was 72, a retired librarian who'd lost her own daughter to cancer. I do this, she explained during her first visit, because I remember what it was like, the loneliness, the fear. No one should die alone. Even if they deserve it? I asked. No one deserves it. Helen brought books. We'd sit in my apartment, me in my hospital bed, her in the single chair I owned, and she'd read aloud. Poetry mostly. Mary Oliver, Naomi Shihab Nye, Maya Angelou. Listen to this one, she said one afternoon, reading from a worn collection. Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this, too, was a gift. Mary Oliver, I said. You know it? I used to read poetry, before. Before what? Before I became someone who only existed for other people. Helen closed the book. Want to talk about it? And somehow I did. I told her everything. About Richard's death, about raising 3 children alone, about sacrificing every dream, every desire, every piece of myself, about their success and my pride, about getting sick and them disappearing, about blocking their numbers and stopping treatment and accepting this ending. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, You know what the tragedy is? That I'm dying alone? No, the tragedy is that you never taught them to see you as a person. You taught them you were a resource, and resources get used up and discarded. It was harsh. It was true. I loved them, I whispered. I know you did, but love without boundaries isn't love. It's self-destruction. My phone rang. My old phone, the one I'd kept in a drawer even after changing numbers. I'd kept it charged out of some masochistic curiosity, wondering if they'd ever notice I was gone. They had. 17 missed calls, dozens of texts, all from Michael. I read them in chronological order, watching the progression from confusion to irritation to something resembling concern. Mom, why aren't you answering? Getting worried, call me back. This isn't funny. Called Meadowbrook, they said you were discharged. Where are you? Mom, seriously, what the hell? Jennifer says you blocked her too. We're just trying to help. You can't just disappear. Call me immediately. The last one, sent just an hour ago. Mom, I hired a private investigator. We will find you. You're sick and not thinking clearly. You're our family. I stared at that word, family. What did it mean when it only flowed one direction? When it only mattered when the parent was dying and the children started worrying about how it would look, when they suddenly remembered they were supposed to care? I didn't call back. I didn't unblock them. I turned off the phone and put it back in the drawer. Helen, on her next visit, asked if I'd been in touch with them. They've been trying to reach me. And I'm not interested in a deathbed reconciliation that exists only to make them feel better. You don't think they genuinely care? I think they care about how they'll feel after I'm gone, about what people will say, about the story they'll tell themselves about being good children. Helen considered this. Maybe you're right, or maybe they're finally waking up. Either way, it's your choice. My choice. For the first time in decades, I had a choice, and I chose silence. Michael found me anyway. The private investigator earned his fee. 3 weeks after I'd stopped responding, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find my son standing in the hallway of Riverside Towers, looking horrified. His expensive suit was wrong for this neighborhood. His shock was insulting. Mom, Jesus Christ, you're living here? Hello, Michael. Why didn't you tell us you were discharged? We would have... What would you do? Come to get me? Take me in? I laughed bitterly. You hired a detective to find me instead of being there in the first place. He stepped inside, uninvited. His eyes scanned the studio, the hospital bed, the medication bottles on the small table, the emptiness. You stopped treatment. Yes. Without telling us? I don't answer to you. I'm your son. Are you? I asked quietly. Because sons show up, sons call, sons don't disappear when their mothers are dying and only reappear when it becomes an embarrassment. His face flushed. That's not fair. We were dealing with your lives, I know. Your important, busy lives, while I was dealing with cancer and poverty and abandonment. I moved to the door, opened it. You can leave now. Mom, we need to talk about this, about your care, about what makes you feel better, about crafting a narrative where you're the villain. I shook my head. I'm 59 days from death, Michael, maybe less. I'm not spending them making you feel absolved. How can you be so cold? You taught me. He left. The door clicked shut. I stood there shaking. Whether from anger or grief or the cancer eating through me, I couldn't tell. Helen, when she arrived that afternoon, found me crying. Michael came, I managed to say. She sat beside me, holding my hand. And I sent him away. Was that wrong? Am I being cruel? You're protecting yourself. That's not cruelty. That's survival. The pain became unbearable. Claire increased my morphine. The world took on a soft, gauzy quality. Time moved strangely. Hours passed in minutes, minutes stretched into eternities. Helen read to me. Rosa, the visiting nurse, bathed me with gentle hands. Marcus came by with his cousin Maria, who cooked meals I could barely eat but appreciated anyway. These strangers, these people who owed me nothing, they were there. My children weren't. Michael tried twice more. I didn't answer the door. He left notes, long, rambling explanations about stress and misunderstanding and love. He left his phone number, as if I'd lost it, as if I needed it. Jennifer came once. She cried in the hallway, begging me to open the door. Mom, please, I'm sorry. We're all sorry. Please let us make this right. But there was no making it right. Some things, once broken, stay broken. David never came at all. On what would be my second to last lucid day, Helen read me Mary Oliver again. The poem about the summer day, about walking through the fields, about the question, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? I wasted it, I whispered. Did you? Helen asked. You raised 3 children. You survived impossible things. You loved fiercely. I loved people who didn't love me back. That doesn't make your love less real. It makes theirs less real. I thought about that. In my morphine haze, with death so close I could feel its breath, I thought about love. Real love. Not the performance of love. Not the obligation of love. Real, actual love. Had they ever loved me? Or had they loved what I provided? I'd never know. And maybe that was the point. I died on a Tuesday morning, with Helen holding one hand and Claire holding the other. The hospice social worker was there too, a woman whose name I'd forgotten, but whose kindness I'd remember into whatever came next. The morphine made everything soft. The pain had receded into something distant, like a storm you can see on the horizon but can't feel. Margaret, Helen said softly, it's okay to let go. Was it? Was it okay to leave this world having been forgotten by the people I'd loved most? Was it okay to die knowing that my sacrifice had meant nothing? But then Claire squeezed my hand, and Helen hummed something soft and tuneless, and the social worker said, "You are not alone." And I realized in those final moments, with strangers who'd become family, that maybe that was enough. Maybe being seen, being held, being honored by people who chose to love you was more valuable than being tolerated by people who were obligated to. My children would arrive eventually, After, they'd cry at my funeral, they'd tell stories about what a good mother I'd been. They'd believe their own revised history. But they hadn't been there, not when it mattered. These people, Helen, Claire, Rosa, Marcus, Maria, they'd been there. My last thought, as the world faded into soft nothing, was simple. I'd spent my whole life proving my worth to people who'd already decided I had none. What a waste. What a tragedy. What a lesson I'd never get to use. Margaret Chen died at 9:47 a.m., surrounded by the family she'd found in her final months. Her children arrived at 11:15 a.m. They wept, they grieved, they told themselves they'd done their best. But the truth is written in empty hospital rooms and unanswered phones. Some absences can never be forgiven. If this story touched you, stay with me for the next one. Tap subscribe, hit like, share it with someone who would feel it, and leave your thoughts in the comments. My 10 p.m. stories arrives every day at 10 a.m. and 10 p.m., so you're always caught up.